We'll start off with the home team that is functionally the away team, as they're much further away, with Oregon, obviously. And their biggest advantage to me is that they have an elite quarterback in Dillon Gabriel, who is exceptional as a passer and mobile enough to make plays with his legs as well, but I wouldn't say that's his specialty. I think he's a fair bit superior to Drew Aller, who is a great quarterback, but I would say is at the bottom of the tier that Gabriel's in, whereas Gabriel's at the top of the tier, or maybe there is a tier between the two. It's hard to say, but with both still being very good. The next thing I like for Oregon is that they have a great wide receiver in Tez Johnson, who is superior to the average or below average nickelback Cam Miller. So they have the advantage at quarterback, and then they're going to have an advantage for him to have a good weapon as well, which is what you look for. The quarterback can do it on their own, but it's much nicer and easier if they have somebody that is a go-to guy to go to. Shifting now to the defense for Oregon, there's not a lot of offensive advantages for Oregon, as Penn State does have a very good defense, and Oregon also has a good but not maybe elite offense outside of Gabriel, which if you have the quarterback in place, that's, fine. But defensively, Oregon has a stud edge rusher in Jordan Birch who will wreck the day of Drew Shelton, I believe. Shelton is not very good, and Birch, as I said, he's a stud. He's great. So that's a pretty big mismatch. Another big mismatch is that they have an elite defensive tackle in Jamari Caldwell, who can pressure a weak interior offensive line of Penn State. This is kind of going to be a theme for Penn State. They do not have the greatest offense. And when I say that they don't have the greatest offense, I mean Oregon doesn't have the greatest offense, but it is still pretty darn good. Penn State, their offense is kind of as bad as you can be for being a high end team like they are. Next, for Oregon's advantages, though, they have another great defensive tackle in Derek Harmon, who will also destroy probably a weak to middling interior offensive line. I said before that it's weak, and that's arguably true, but I would say that it's also arguable that they have a sort of just mid tier offensive line in the interior. So there's quite a bit of a range. I would say that it's closer to being weak than it is average or anything else, but if you want to say that it's average, that's fair as well. The next thing I like for Oregon is that they have a very good run defense that will force Aller to go to ineffective wide receivers. Aller is, like I said, he's great, but he is going to be passing to not very good wide receiving options, and that's about the only way they're going to be able to run their offense. And Oregon's going to realize that at some point, maybe from the jump, and that's just going to make things even more difficult for Penn State. The next thing for Oregon, there's a lot of advantages here. We're just going through one by one. Is that they have a good nickelback in Brandon Johnson, and that's going to be a superior matchup to a poor wide receiver in Liam Clifford. So that's a direct matchup. The ones we were talking about before were kind of generalized. This is a specific one. Clifford is not the caliber of player that Johnson is. Johnson is good. Clifford is not so good. The last advantage for Oregon is there's 8 of them. This is the 8th. Is that Jabbar Muhammad is superior to his wide receiver as well. So that is another cornerback that's better than the wide receiver he's lined up against. That's pretty incredible. There's a lot of trench advantages for Oregon, and then there's a decent amount of 2 out of 3 corners are going to be definitively better than their receivers on any given play. As for Penn State now, they do not have 8 advantages. I'll be full frontal about that. They do, however, have a pretty sizable one on the offensive side of things, which they don't have a great offense, but they do have a stud tight end in Tyler Warren, who will dominate the good but not great coverage linebackers of Oregon. He is much more talented than the coverage linebackers are for Oregon, and that will be just a real issue for Oregon. They are going to have to specifically lock up Warren if they want to win this game, because if he goes off like he's capable of doing, this could get really messy for them. The next thing for Penn State is the start of their defensive string of advantages, as they have an elite cornerback in AJ Harris, who will erase any wide receiver that Oregon throws at them, or him rather. So that's a pretty big one, that they can close off a side of the field or a wide receiver in general. That's nice to have. That's very convenient. It makes things a lot simpler for the defense as a whole. The next advantage is that star edge rusher Abdul Carter will be far superior to either offensive tackle he's lined up against. If they want to shift him to the left of the offense, then I think he's actually more naturally over the left side. They can do that. If they want to shift him rather to the right side of the offense, they can do that. He's going to be able to get after the quarterback any which way, and he has the chance to really dominate this game as well, like Warren does on the offensive side of the ball. For the final advantage, to give you a glimmer of what's ahead for Penn State, the fourth and final advantage, they have a very good defensive tackle in Zane Durant, and he'll be going against a middling interior offensive line of Oregon. So he should be able to get in free as a pass rusher, and he should have success against the run also. What do I think about the game? Well, Oregon has twice the amount of advantages that Penn State does. I think it's pretty clear what I think. Oregon is arguably the team to beat. They are the number 1 ranked team after all, and I think that's pretty well deserved. I thought that Ohio State was right there with them for number 1. That loss to Michigan was very yucky. Texas is also definitely up there. There's some conversations for different teams, but Oregon probably has the best argument, and there is a lot to like about their team in general as well. I would be more than fine with giving up the 3.5 points for Oregon. I think that if you wanted to raise it to even 6.5, that's possibly a play also, because I could see Oregon winning pretty decently. Those are my thoughts on Oregon versus Penn State. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section, and also be sure to like and subscribe for more football content.